This House believes that the European left should promote a hard left agenda, including the nationalisation of major industries, very high tax rates on the wealthy, and an expansion of the welfare state. Best of luck to all 4 teams.
I'd like to welcome all of the teams to the EFL final of the 2017 World Universities Debating Championship. Congratulate all the teams that made it this far. Welcome. I'd like to call upon the Prime Minister to assume the floor and introduce the case for Syed government behaviour.
Ladies and gentlemen, the problem is EU faced a lot of economic problem. We found huge disparity between rich and poor country within the European zone, right? Economic unstable become a prominent problem in a status quo due to Brexit case, Italy that plan to go back to their currency, and a lot of crisis thing that happening in a status quo that make EU become less appealing for their members, and they become, questioning whether or not the economic benefit is still going, right? We think as an EOG, we believe that EU left wing should do something about it, knowing that only their stances and only their policy that can help this. Moreover, when right now they're in a very glorified situation, in a very golden situations in which there are a lot of people supporting them and they're in a majority of congressmen. That is why, ladies and gentlemen, what we mean by promote in the status quo, we're going to highly campaign on a hard policy such as highly tax the wealthy, expansions of welfare state, and making sure, ladies and gentlemen, it would pass, the policy would be passed and hopefully can be implemented in the future, ladies and gentlemen, using their influence right now. I'm going to talk to you 2 things on this debate. I'm going to talk to you why it is necessary for EU left wing to promote this. And second of all, I'm going to talk to you the impact and outcome expected from the OG world, right? First thing first, why it is necessary, right, for EU left wing to promote hard left agenda? We think that this is exactly the momentum for EU left wing to do this, because on this period of time, finally they can take the majority seat in the government, ladies and gentlemen. What we mean by this, they have a lot of supporters to influence, the supporters still voting for their policy a lot of time, ladies and gentlemen. Why we cannot hang on to right wing's policy, right? Because most of the time they only focus on their own economy development within states, or simply, a lot of development that is nothing to do with other country or the interdependence of these EU economy, right? That is why we think that knowing that this is the golden time for them, that they have the majority seats in the government and have a lot of voices a lot of people to influence with their position right now. We think that it's important for them to do this right now, ladies and gentlemen. Why it has to be right now? Knowing that Angela Merkel right now getting attacked by right wing due to policy of letting this refugee come in, we think that it is very, very reluctant for you not to take this chance right away to bring up this policy right away, ladies and gentlemen. Because knowing that position is going to be reluctant, later on in the future, it will be really, really hard for you to pass this kind of policy, right? That is why knowing that this is the right time, this is the best time for you to put this policy up, and you have more power, ladies and gentlemen, and more voice, more power, and more places to dominate the discussion in the government. We think that it's time for you to do this. Before that, closing.
Okay, the problem is that there is actually a rise in the right wing, and Jeremy Corbyn is doing exactly what you're propping, and he's dropping in polls dramatically.
Yeah, precisely. That is why, ladies and gentlemen, when it's happening, what happened is that people that currently voting for left wing to govern, ladies and gentlemen, they're going to stay being poor and stay being unable to purchase anything, and they're being the most alienated person in a crisis, in a status quo, right? That is why we need to do something about it. But second, right, why we think that it's also moral obligations of these people. We think that in a status quo, there's not a lot of improvement for these people. Those people that are in crisis still keep on in crisis. The austerity doesn't really help them. They're still poor, they're still being unemployed and stuff like that, right? That is why we think that knowing that you have moral responsibility to contribute back, or even to to represent these voices that already choose you and pick you in this position, ladies and gentlemen, we think it is your moral obligation to do that. Knowing that it's going to be really hard to pass this policy, we think that this is exactly your time to represent them. Knowing, we think that you cannot stay silent, seeing a lot of people are being deprived in a crisis situation and a recession. That is why you should do something, right? Nextly, the impact of the outcome, right? At least, ladies and gentlemen, in our case, even though you at least at the end of the day you're going to get down in the future because might be right wing going to throw you down, we think that it's okay because at least the policy can be enacted already, and people can already enjoy that policy and pass it to the people already, right? We think that even though you're going to get down, for example, we think that it takes years and years for you to off this policy, right? That is why we think that at the very least this policy can give benefit, or at least can be felt by those peoples that you represent. That is why we think that it is important for you to at least do something, because it's actually creates something positive. But most likely, right, we think that why it is important to tax the wealthy and keep the expansions of welfare state at the end of the day, because we think that in times of crisis and recession, we think it is important to give the power back to the poor, right? In time of recession, you have to spend more money. You have to bring the economy confident back. We think that society can have more money in these cases to jump back finally, to go for looking for a job, for example, or have at least a purchasing power, right? And this is helping actually the economy within that country, the company that already get down because the inability to fulfill the demand because there's no people buying that product, right? At the end of the day, this is what helps the problem that right now happening, ladies and gentlemen, by giving back by giving the power back to the peoples and enable people to activate the economy within this country and this poor country, right? That is why we think that by letting these people jump back, and at least by letting these people survive, ladies and gentlemen, and enjoy at least the economy benefit given through this policy, we think that not only you're going to survive them as a person that trusts you in a parliament and lead you in a parliament, but also you're going to have the ability to better off the situations in those countries, right? That is why we think that not only you're going to protect the people in a grassroots level, you're also going to protect the company also in that places that also rely a lot to the economy power of their own people, ladies and gentlemen. This is the only thing that we can help, while the right wing won't ever care about that kind of things. How the position prove to us that it's going to happen in that case, right? For all those reasons, we beg you to propose.
I thank the speaker for their remarks and call upon the Leader of the Opposition to deliver their 7-minute address here.
Ladies and gentlemen, when this government talks about heavily radicalization, the left, the moderate left, but even also the already very left parties in Europe, we fear enormously for European society, and this in every single European country. Therefore, in my speech, I will first of all show why it heavily hurts democratic and political discourse in every European country or EU country if we radicalize the left, so we have no longer moderate lefts. I will also show why it is heavily hurtful for all European societies if we if we move away from capitalism and heavily nationalize and heavily disincentivize personal engagement in society. But first of all, some points of rebuttal to the opening government. So first of all, when they are speaking about Angela Merkel, I highly doubt that this does anything to her because she's right now considered moderate right. So her party would be on the other side, would be actually opposed to all those extremist lefts. For example, we talk in Germany here, it would be the SPD, who are currently considered moderate left, who would move far more to the left part of the spectrum. So we would actually divide politics, and right now we see in many countries actually we do have cooperations in between those moderate parties. May they be moderate left, moderate right, maybe they be liberals, green parties, and so on. What we do now is we no longer have this common interaction because what is proposed, what are the policies promoted by the left are so far away from the common sense we have in moderate parties right now, there would be no longer political interaction between them. Also, right now, if they are talking about how the left's in a good position, we have to realize that what we are promoting is not what people elected when they were electing the left. So when they were elected moderate left, they were for progressive change, small steps, raising the minimum wage by some percent gradually. They were for making sure that labor rights are respected. This is not the same as nationalizing the largest enterprises, the largest employers in all countries. We're talking here probably, they didn't mention examples, Volkswagen, Daimler, maybe Syed or other Spanish, Italian companies. This is not what the left promoted in their elections so far. So now changing the course would heavily change also what they stood for. And it is highly dubious they would be re-elected in potential elections. So in addition to this, it has not been explained why we could fight right-wing populism that we see right now. So the far right by far left, because actually what we're seeing right now is fear of immigrants, for example, which is the main argument for populists they are making use of to draw parts of the population. We don't necessarily see that the nationalization of companies makes it any less fearsome for those people who are already in favor of populists to vote for, to be afraid and to still vote populist. So we have not seen how this should solve any issues with populism right now. So now, first of all, let me come to my case. What is important that we have a solid, like a healthy discourse in politics in all over Europe. So what we would have is they would implement heavy wealth taxes, heavy nationalization, effectively moving them far to the left and effectively denouncing capitalism. Because the largest agents of capitalism, the large multinationals in all countries, would be no longer independent, but rather state enterprises.
Why do you think it's not a hand-in-hand solution when you're, tax the wealthy and you're finally able to increase the rate of salary of people?
So first of all, it is highly dubious that nationalizing some enterprises would make them even as competitive as they are right now, potentially having to fire people, having to lower the salaries. So the nationalization is actually an argument for our side why salaries might decrease, why employment might decrease. And wealth taxes are nothing you can this is going to the state, it's not going to the enterprise to redistribute. So maybe wealth taxes make sure that we can afford the enormous amount of social spending you want, but it's not increasing wages. So for working people, situation might be worse. If they are stakeholders, that is to say, if they are interested in the large enterprises they're working for, they will suffer for sure. So this election discourse is hurting because we have already the far right who is polarizing against all the other parties, calling them too weak to cover issues. And right now we see that moderate parties work together and they have a common ground. They do agree on capitalism in a general form. They might be arguing about some level of wealth taxes, but they do agree that it should not be 90% or something. They do agree that that capital, like national firms are, large firms are important, but they should be independent. So if we draw away those grounds, they no longer have the possibility to discuss. Conservatives, for example, would never agree to sit on the same table as those far lefts and make some sound working policies. So what you have to show is that they, first of all, would have to actually be elected. And people right now, if they are employed in large enterprises, have no interest in electing those people if they have to fear for their jobs. Even though social welfare might be increased. So especially the middle class has no interest in electing the very far left whatsoever. So now why is this capitalism so important? First of all, we have a globalized world. So other countries are capitalistic or heavily subsidizing their multinationals. If we now also nationalize those, we are no longer competing with other countries because we have reduced incentives. We have incentives to invest if wealth is heavily taxed. We can no longer ascertain that that people who are currently now owning basically a lot of capital, we keep this capital in the EU or rather move it to the US, to other parts of the world where they might evade the enormous wealth taxes. Or at least make sure that their enterprises they're currently invested in, which will become national, so to speak, they will lose their assets, that this won't happen. So if they no longer provide the capital, first of all, firms will become automatically less productive because they may be lacking the large investments in machinery, in the entire productive process. Then they might lose their competitiveness. They might have to fire people because they can no longer afford, because their demand for their cars is no longer as high. They might be losing innovative power because they lack the venture capital we're talking about. And this is something that can only be afforded by people who own capital, who are heavily disincentivized by wealth taxes. So we do see that capitalism provides large issues for the current working parts of the society. And this, therefore, they would be never inclined to vote for them. And even if they would, like if the far left would be voted into office, they would suffer. So, therefore, we can show that that we would hurt the moderate part of society. We would not benefit on a large scale because we would lose so much what we are currently benefiting of as European countries. And I beg you, therefore, to oppose this motion. Thank you.
I thank the speaker for their address and call upon the Deputy Prime Minister to deliver their response here.
Opening opposition talk about, look, we need to compete in globalization without facing the reality that Spain faces right now, which most of the society cannot have the buying power, for example, or which that the company inside Spain cannot compete with the global company outside that makes those companies who give a lot of job to Spanish disappear and more job fill are gone, ladies and gentlemen. Those reality is not engaged by opening opposition. They play on base case scenario that as if this country are as if this country are so powerful. So this is my first issue. Why hard left policy is the best way to grow your economy in a time of crisis? Because what happened in status quo right now in Spain, for example, houses are left behind, factories are empty. Means that those people have no purchasing power at all, which is very important to grow the economy from inside, right? So what is the hard left policy stance? For example, high rate tax to the wealth so people can distribute it to the poor, for example, like giving more subsidy to the poor so people from the poor can have more buying power, so can they fulfill their own needs, for example. Or industry, open more factory inside by nationalizing these companies so they can have more, easier in law or something, and then by those means that you can open up more jobs for people from inside, ladies and gentlemen. Means what? Means that you give more possibility of job for these people, means that you can give more income for those people, ladies and gentlemen. Means when these people have more money, they can have more economic transaction happen under the status quo. And this economic transaction is incredibly important, right? Because if when you're facing globalizations, but you don't have power to compete or to buy products, means that your economic inside those particular country cannot grow and will left behind by the globalization that happened, ladies and gentlemen. That's why this hard left policy is very important, because it makes you have power first, then it makes you become ready to compete with the globalization. That's why in this globalization era, when you are faced with tons of crises, when factories are gone, jobs are lost, houses are left, we believe hard left policy is the best way for you to make the society have the buying power and grow the economy from inside. Then you can compete through the globalization. But before I continue, yes.
Okay. If we prove to you that by introducing your policy, there will be significantly less chance for them to go into parliament and to implement any of the things you talk about, you have significant harms on your side of the house.
Okay, so directly to my second issue, right? Why? By promoting hard left policy, society acceptance and support will be better for the left wing. So, ladies and gentlemen, we believe that this hard left policy is most likely the most relevant condition that is being faced by the society, where the majority of people are not wealthy, where the majority of people are, humble or to the ground people, where they buying power are not so much, right? So when we promote and campaigning for this policy, majority of the society will see that this policy is a policy that is lucrative for them, ladies and gentlemen. They will see that this policy is a policy that can help them. And it happened in the majority of the society of Europe, right? So when they see that the left wing are promoting this value, moreover, this majority of society would like to support this left wing policy because they feel that this is the policy and the movement that can help them. That's why in terms of winning the heart of your voters, most likely this left party can have more possibility in doing so. But ladies and gentlemen, for example, how about the rich, right? We think right now in parliament, I think the left also have power. When best case scenario, if this policy pass, the rich regardless will have to follow this policy anyway. Because right now the government are holding, like for example, their business permit, for example, that is very important for the rich, so they can still have their wealth income, right? So regardless the rich like this policy or not, if this policy can pass and supported by the majority, this policy will get supported anyway. Moreover, when this left wing party have the responsibility to their voters, for example, to their fellow who trust them to make the economy better, to make this policy, we believe the principle of WUDC saying that you have to fight for your voters should be fight in this campaign, right? That's why we believe support will come from your majority, and if it is rejected by the minority, in this case the rich, we believe the policy can pass and can benefit the majority, which is in needs of help right now. Closing.
Okay, can you please elaborate on the mechanisms through which these people are going to get new jobs if there isn't a demand for them?
So, ladies and gentlemen, firstly, for example, when you nationalize company and give easier law for this company to open more factory inside, means that you shift the production inside and open up more job for those people. That means more jobs created. And when you give high tax to the rich and redistribute it to the poor, means that you can give more subsidy to the poor, means that the poor can have more buying power, they can have more food. That means this policy will help their life, right? So we believe, yes, this kind of policy will actually help them through job, through money, and more access to their needs, ladies and gentlemen. But our best case scenario, if this policy pass, people will feel more supportive to the left wing and to this policy, and this benefit can be felt by those majority for a very long time. But at least in our worst case scenario, if this policy pass but it is rejected by the right wing and this right wing oppose this policy, we believe at least during those time when this policy pass, our benefit can accrue in those minimum time for the poor, ladies and gentlemen. So if you want to help the majority of the poor, which is your basic supporters of this left-wing policy, we believe we should campaign in a hard way of the left-wing policy we're very proud to propose.
I thank the speaker for their address and call upon the Deputy Leader of the Opposition to conclude the front half of this round of debate. Here.
I am confused by the characterization of the reality by opening government. I simply do not see all those left-wing majorities in countries right now. I don't see the left being in power everywhere and being able to change it. All the recent elections were won by conservatives. In Germany, conservatives are in power. In France, they will be soon again if they are not already. In Great Britain, they are. All the major countries at the moment in the European Union, which have a large shares of the economy, they are conservative. They are not in favor of it. To be honest, if the population wanted it, it would have happened already, because why wouldn't they propose it if it were so easy to do it? But apart from that, 3 other reasons why it's unlikely to happen. Since the Second World War, basically all of Europe was doing was trying to stay away from socialism and keep it back. So simply the cultures within these countries, the political cultures, are pretty much against it. Europe is a success story overall, and it was done by capitalism, by simply creating jobs, by doing it in the normal way. But even if it worked, and they say the state-backed companies will simply create new jobs, I do not see where these states, which are already nearing bankruptcy, will take the money to do it. Countries like Germany, where this definitely won't happen, that the left wing will take over, will never allow it. If Germany doesn't like it, then I'm sorry to say it, but the European Central Bank won't push any more money into these countries, and it doesn't work. But even if we take it out of the European zone, I cannot see how investors will still trust these countries if they simply do not know when the state will simply take away, will further nationalize more companies and so on. I believe that investors at the moment are really liking stability, are really liking having their own rights protected and not the state intervening everywhere. So, as long as they cannot show us really why the left wing is highly likely to win us in the meantime, and even if the left were, if it was close to them winning, then I think that a lot of countries and a lot of companies would lose trust in the system, and we would have a major breakdown of the stock market, because investors would try to get their money out of the system as fast as possible before it's getting nationalized. I think we will have to talk not about what happens if it is enacted, because it won't be, but how it changes the political communication and what changes if the left doesn't try to do small steps but a huge one. So, what we have to remember here is that this isn't a difference of nuance, of a small step, but something completely different from the status quo. If you want to convince the population that the status quo is bad, well, that they should do something that is completely different from the status quo, you need to tell them that the status quo is not even a bit bad, but they need to hate the status quo. The only way for left-wing parties to really find a majority is to convince the population that these corporations, that huge corporations are evil, that rich people are the problem, that they deserve to be taxed, that they deserve to be having taken their stuff away from them. But simply the way to do it, the rhetoric involved here, is not one of normal political context, but it's putting groups of people against each other. It's telling the poor that the other ones are their enemies and so on. And this creates a huge problem. My partner already told you that simply within the system of political parties, it will create a problem, because if it's hard to argue if if people have simply completely different premises for their arguments, there simply is no basis for your argumentation if you see the world so differently, like it will be the case in the polarized world that will be created by this left-wing campaigning. Parties will refuse to cooperate with, so right-wing parties will refuse to cooperate with left-wing parties, and will even say this before the election, which will mean that all the left-wing voters will simply think that they are completely being ignored by the mainstream system, by the elites. If large parts of the country think that they are being ignored by the system, they will lose trust in democracy. And that's the reason why we won't have simply protests on the street like they are happening in some countries of Europe, but these protests will turn violent, because they believe that protests by themselves will not change anything. They might think the only way to change the system is to break the system down by violence. I cannot see, and if you will try to show us how a forceful revolution is the best thing for Europe, please try it, otherwise I do not think it's smart for me to engage with that. But before that, closing.
What do you think is the main reason for a lot of alt-right parties are gaining momentum through the populist ideology?
So, we have a singular situation in the last couple of years, that there was a huge influx of migrants, of refugees into the European Union. The states were not prepared for that. The populations were not prepared for that, and the people are afraid of losing their identities, are afraid of losing their wealth right now. If your solution is to tell them that these countries will even have an even greater change, will lose the way of life that they had for the last 40 years, then I cannot see how this will create any more benefits here. What will happen with this different perception is not just within political parties or so, but if the major industries and so on are seen as enemies by a large part of the population, this will create problems. Because if we have this rhetoric in place, then certain actions that are necessary but look heartless will be seen in a different way. For example, if a company's only way to stay alive is to lay off a lot of people, which in this case would save all the other jobs, if you have a rhetoric in place that this corporation is evil and only egoistically looking out for their own way, then there will be larger protests against it. And so sensible policies in this case wouldn't be enacted, that in our model will be enacted so more. Same works basically with rich people, or wealthy people, or simply people trying to be rich. If they are seen as bad people, an enemy of the states, it's less likely that people will try to achieve great success. Well, we can even add to it, if 80% of your wealth is taken away, why would you try to get that rich? But if you have less people who are trying to really take the risk to become entrepreneurs, if they could simply move to in the United States as well, I can also not see how the opposition wins the economic case. Basically, what we need to think about in this debate is not whether a socialism in Europe is workable at the moment simply because it's so far from the reality. We need to think about whether the left can create its goals, which is they don't necessarily need the socialism, they just want to have a bit more equality. Whether we can get this by them being moderate or by them being really left-wing. And we on side opposition believe that it's far easier to make incremental steps if you have an incremental position, because the other side will respect you more, the other side will be more willing to bargain and barter with you, because the other side will simply still respect you as a normal politician and not see you as an enemy of the system. And for these reasons, very proud to oppose this motion.
I thank the Speaker for their address and call upon the Member of Government to extend the case for side proposition.
We were talking about the context in European countries. What is exactly happening in European countries is that a lot of people getting tired of the political elitism to control the government, and also being tired of this kind of establishment exists in the country. So what we are going to prove to you is that why actually our hard left agenda is equally attractive to the this kind of perception gained by this populism, and also why actually in our model will bring you the concrete good impact towards the European citizens, and also especially the condition in the status quo that the EU is taking this kind of economic crisis. So firstly, I'm going to talk about what some rebuttals towards the opposition side, mainly two rebuttals. Firstly, they're talking about that they do not want the hard left agenda because they want to promote the moderate left one. To some extent, actually, they are partially agree that the power of the government is so important. It's because they admit that the importance of government control. And secondly, when they're talking about that, they want to because they hurt the interests of the wealthy people, and they actually bring let the companies to be less productive, because so that they will hurt the European nations as a whole. We don't believe so. Why? Because you are still protecting the wealthy people and hurts the majority of the people. Because the poor people and the middle class, which consists of the huge majority of the nation, do not see the concrete benefits bringing to them. You're actually still standing on the stage there to hurt them. And also, we believe that you want to argue that because they will be less productive in companies, so that it will hurt the national economy as a whole. So I'm going to provide a comparison why actually let the country to gain this kind of power is more rational choices for them, and why actually will be more benefits to the economy. So firstly, I'm going to talk about that. Why, especially in the European countries, it's so important to provide this kind of hard left agenda. Because we see that the people are losing confidence on the financial situation of the nation, because they say that the nation do not have the power to protect them, especially when the government facing this kind of financial crisis and deficits, because the government do not have this kind of backup money to put this kind of monetary policy to keep this kind of balance to better improve the national economy as a whole. So we say that this is the problem, because people are losing confidence towards the government. So why we say that our policy is much better? Because firstly, we say that we let the government to get this kind of direct control of this this major industries and companies. Actually, they will have the more potential to react in the very rational way. Because when you let this free market to develop themselves, the companies will only facing their own competitions and only focus on their own profitability. So that compared to the nation to react as a whole, we believe that this is a better condition to let the nation to see the whole huge picture of the economic development, and also to get the control of this confidence. And secondly, when we get the tax from the wealthy, increasing the tax rate in a large scale, actually we will have this kind of balance towards have a balance for the inequality things. There will actually be less poor existing in a status quo, because we actually reallocate this kind of wealth and allocate it to the poor people. Actually, we are the actor to increase this kind of, to reduce this kind of inequality, to let the people to have the better outcome. So, and also, to when the financial crisis happen again, we're the side to ensure that the government have this kind of power to control the national economy, so that it won't get loose in the future. Yes.
If even a small increase in minimum wage can be branded as the next step towards socialism by conservative people, why do you think that voters will be more likely to do it if right now it's simply a normal step in policy?
So I'm going to talk about why the hard left will be more attractive in the perception that will gain by the citizens. Because we say that why the people will choose to become more radical and to get more anti-establishment is that people get tired of the status quo, that the government is only controlled by the political elites. So we say that why we say the hard left agenda will be more attractive compared to this kind of situation, because people will naturally to vote for this kind of party who can think about their own interests and to reduce this kind of steady establishment as a whole. So actually we say that if the people were willing to choose this kind of more radical, the government anti-establishment, so we say that it's better to let the people to choose the far left one instead of the far right one, because we say that we'll let the people to become less extremes in our status quo. So, and we will say that the people will not reject this kind of idea, because we see that because European has this kind of infrastructure which is concrete, so that have this kind of condition and utility to develop this kind of socialism in European countries. And also because this kind of democratic idea has been concrete for such a long time, so actually there will be less dictatorship that the opposition side may argue about, because there will be less corrupted government in the European status quo. So, and also there is the freedom of the media to serve as this kind of check and balance system as a whole. So we believe that in the case that provided outside, we're actually let the people to believe that we are the moderate government to bring more benefits to the citizens as a whole. And thirdly, why we say that actually will bring more good impact to the citizens and also the nation as a whole. So we say that actually we are the side to provide the benefits towards the citizens, because we are reduce this kind of imbalance and the income imbalance, and bring more power, bring more purchasing power towards the citizens. When we see that the people become more protectionism and to only focus on their interests is the bad thing, because when the very time that the people only focused on their own profitability, so that this kind of imbalance and the difference between the classes become larger and larger. So we want to avoid this kind of situation to happen, and so that will bring more stability towards the society, because actually the people will say that the income disparity is reduced and the difference between classes actually reduced. And thirdly, we say that actually will make the so that in the large picture we are providing stronger economy as a nation as a whole, and also bring more stability exists in the society. So we are proud to propose.
I thank the speaker for their remarks and invite the member of opposition to extend the case for op bench.
Oh, sorry. Let me just sort my papers. Sorry. Okay, this is not good. May I? In 2017, elections will be held in most of the European countries like Germany, France, Netherlands, Poland, and more. We have a radical left wing on the rise, and we say this is the crucial thing that will lead to left-wing parties being cast out of the parliament, having significantly less power, which will go to the center-right, or in some cases, extreme right, and we think those 2, 3, 5% is the thing that will be crucial in determining how much right-wing power will there be. So all of their cases depend on the left wing being in power. We will dismantle their case through our analysis. But second of all, in most countries of the EU and their characterization, standard is actually fine. Those are the countries like Germany, those are the countries like Sweden, UK, France, and these kind of things. So we don't see there is much support for these kind of policy precisely because capitalism made them feel actually okay. So they have moderately center-left, but now when we propose these radical things, they are more likely to go to the right wing, and that's why we will win on their comparative and this kind of stuff. So where we think this won't have any impact, and this is the second part of the EU, these are the countries with low standards. We think those countries have a structural problem in which they cannot implement these policies even when they get in power. Like Syriza couldn't in Greece, like Podemos couldn't in Spain. What does that mean? That means you have less faith in the left wing. That means you have less support for the left wing when they platform on something they cannot achieve. So the comparative on both countries will be on our side of the house. But let me talk to you about their case in these kind of things. They're talking about like a few points, but the rest will be integrated. They're talking about rich will have to comply. We say there are multiple ways in which you can abuse the system if you're rich, like having a shell company, and which we saw in Panama Papers, and these kind of things, like going to Monaco as Novak Djokovic did, and these kind of things, like having corruption and exploiting corruption of the left wing, like the Syriza, like Brazil with Amelia, and these kind of things. We say rich can still opt out of your policy, which will leave your countries in ruins. So we say your policy on an absolute scale fails. But even if it works, we say this won't bring that change that you're willing. So that's why we win. And they're talking about moral obligation. You should represent these kind of things. We say you have moral obligation to center-right, center-left people who voted on the platform that you were willing to do right now. So they're saying that center-right and center-left, who is now in power, which we don't see where this is happening, have moral obligation. We say they have moral obligation for people that voted for them on the center-left policy that they did. If there is a demand for these kind of things, we say yes. Okay, a lower chance that they will get in power on two levels. First of all, moderate people, and why do they vote like that? So first of all, we think most people have status quo bias, so they mean that radical change often don't really fly by them in these kind of things. And middle class don't really see the benefits as much like welfare in these sort of things. And we think that middle class and median voters are the majority who decide elections and decide who wins. We think most people are center-left right now because it sounds reasonable to them. And it's a battle between center-left and center-right with right-wing extremists going because of the migrant crisis. But when we take away that center-left right, we think those people will flock to the other side, will flock to probably to center-right, but some of them that hate center-right will flock because they fear migrants, and that is the second thing they are willing to vote for. But second of all, it's easy for the right wing to prove that these policies don't work by simple examples, like Yugoslavia, like communist countries that really failed when they nationalized their companies in these sort of things, and they had ruins of an economy after that. We say that's what conservatives and Tories did to labor, and that's why they're in power right now. Second of all, we're talking about you have strong indoctrination against communism because we went through the Cold War and these kind of things. So people have strong bias against communism in Europe. So this is why these things are less likely to fly as well. We think you have a proof of these kind of things not working with Jeremy Corbyn dropping in polls every day because precisely he's doing the things that they're talking about. And Labour won't be in power for like 10 years precisely because of him. We think that is hugely disrespectful towards Labour voters who counted somebody to represent them but now don't have anybody to represent them because he sounds unreasonable to them. And second of all, we think you still have small radical left parties that are competing but cannot manage to get past 2%. This is not a two-party system, this is a multi-party system. So by them, we see there is no demand for these kind of things. That's why this doesn't fly. Money interest, and how does this also? We think rich won't be a bystanders in this and won't just take away all of our stuff. We think this puts them in a direct opposition to their interests. What does that mean? They're more likely to crack down on these sort of things by having more media control, like they already have in status quo, but now cracking down and diminishing the ability of the left wing. Second of all, we have campaign finance laws that allows them to have more money overall to go to the right wing and to center left. Also, they have lobby groups, so they can bring presence to the right wing. Now they have an urgency to do this because they don't want to have their company nationalized. We think this is easier for them to dismantle. That's why they will do it. Why did they get into power? And let me entertain that idea and these kind of things. We think in most cases where that would happen is things like Syriza or Podemos and these kind of things. We think you have structural problems. Do you have a PI? Because it's running out of time. Yes? No? Okay.
We believe that even though companies are nationalized, you will still have the power of the brand, for example. So people will still want to buy it. And people won't be...
Okay, we don't care because that won't happen because left wing won't get in power by your mechanism in these companies. Second of all, why you have structural reasons that you cannot implement that in Greece in this kind of stuff? You have IMF, you have international community that is banning you from doing these sort of things. Even if you want to, you can vote Oxy all you want, somebody will stop you from doing this sort of thing. So what does that mean? When you voted for Oxy, when you voted for Syriza, and they didn't fulfill what they're trying to do, they will never vote for that policies again. What does it mean? You have strongly less left-wing policies being implemented in the status quo in Greece and these kind of things. And second of all, you have a multi-party system. Most of these things require coalitions. If you sound unreasonable, nobody's willing to go into coalition with you. Even if you have a 30%, you won't get in power. Somebody else will get in power. What will that mean? Right-wing moderates and right-wing extremists go into power because now they have more in common than you because you want to nationalize everything and they cannot let that fly. What does that mean about the impacts of this debate? We think when you now have two voter blocks that these moderates will flock to. There is a moderate right and extreme right. We think moderate right, fine. But giving any support to the extreme left, which is already on the brink of passing and winning like Marine Le Pen and these sort of things, could be a crucial point in which we lose Europe, in which we lose and people leave Europe, people leave it to ruins, these kind of things. And second of all, we have less checks and balances because we have less presence of the left wing in parliament, which means right wing can do as they please. So we think that leads to less representation and we have more obligation not to do this because these sort of things. We showed you concrete mechanism and impact. That's why you should vote closing opposition.
I thank the Speaker for their address and call upon the Government Whip to conclude the case and side proposition today. Hear you.
Dear panels, the main problem in Europe nowadays is that a lot of people feel so bad about the established government, and they don't trust those elites either in the big companies or in the government system. That's why we see like the far-right parties are so easily to sell their ideology via their demagogue. Also, the economic problem in the European continent is that a lot of big companies are not very efficient and they have market failure, and worst of all, like their government, which has the ability to bail them out or save them, can't interfere with the market nowadays. We, as a closing government, we think socialism is a good thing. If the government has the capability and will be more likely to be benevolent in terms of leftist ideology, etc. And also, socialism will be a very efficient way to reorganize the economy and to bring about the structural reform. Even if it's not very good, we think socialism, like far-left ideology, is a very good way to counter against the far-right ideology in far-right parties in the European continent. So firstly, people will love, like they say that people once loved far-left parties, like countries with lower standards, sorry Greece, like they have less faith in the left-wing parties, that's why they don't vote for them. However, we believe that if we have better welfare system for those people, people will also vote for the far-left policy because now they can have more afternoon tea, right? People won't hate socialism in this way. Like other countries, people love socialism on this way. Why it's so powerful as a counter-narrative against the far-right party? Because it's so equally attractive with the demagogue, like Vera has told you just now. Like people feel so bad because they feel their government are not standing with the people. Their government are caring more about the EU and more immigrants, etc., etc. So, like for the people, it's very important to make them feel that the government now is standing with those people and having some very aggressive policy, trade off some efficiency in the government system to let them buy into their ideology. The characterization of the far left is that they're also very populist and very anti-establishment. This is the distinction between central left and far left party. That's why we win on this clash, that people will more buy into the ideology of far left parties. And the comparative between far left and far right, when we have to make a choice between these two things, is that we think there are too many pernicious things from far right party because they target at white supremacy and they're blinding their EU skepticism and without comprehensive and normal way to develop their economy. However, far left parties, they at least are going to nationalize and have better economic strategies under our paradigm. Yes.
Okay, reality check. If people want this, why is there no popular support for small radicals or Jeremy Corbyn in the status quo?
Because they are not having very aggressive agenda in the status quo. That's why we want them to have aggressive agenda. We believe that the center left now has to strategically ally with far left to crack down the alt-right parties in the status quo. Let's look at the strategy that far-right used, and we use the same way to crack down the disadvantage they have in the status quo. So what are the benefits under this paradigm? Is that economically, in terms of job, right? Opening told you that the jobs won't decrease, but we will tell you that European citizens don't necessarily like jobs. Now you can still stay at home and getting the welfare at home, and people will feel more happy, right? So that's why economically, and also we will have more jobs for the immigrants, and people will be less pissed off when they see immigrants doing the job they don't necessarily like. And also, we believe that there will still be incentives for companies, big companies, to compete because, let's look at the big companies in China. They're always in the highest position in the Forbes, etc., etc. Now, they still as the center of the economy in a country, government will have strong incentive to protect those companies and to make sure that the economy will function, like the Italian banks and the Deutsche banks, with the interference with the government regulations, those companies will be better solved instead of their lacking resources here, because governments, far left governments, can use the resources they amass to bail out those banks and to make the scandals less pernicious. So there's no mechanism from their side of the house to prove to you that why governments would simply screw up their national companies and let their companies die out. The premise of OO's case is that with a left agenda, the economy will be very bad and people will lose jobs because now the rich get very angry. Now we see under our paradigm, the rich are not very important if the government has their companies already, after they take over the companies. And secondly, we think a lot of countries, they don't even worry about the main industry, etc., etc. But the biggest problem in their countries are their financial system, which needs government's monetary policy and also other policies to support their survival. Thirdly, even if there's economic problem in some European countries, the root cause is that the market is very inefficient and there's market failure. Corrupted companies can't be interfered by the government. Now the far left parties are going to interfere with those economy, and we think they're going to be more efficient, and the companies, the country's economy will no longer get worse and worse. But more importantly, the salary in nationalized company won't decrease because we have a lot of labor unions which are supported by the leftist ideology. Even if we have to decrease wages, then it must be the extreme cases such as unusually high unemployment, so that we can get things done and bail out banks with those with very efficient government policy. But in terms of socially, we think people will feel better about their living standard, especially the middle class and the lower class. And also, more importantly, in terms of the humanitarian issues, far left wing are more likely to be very inclusive and tolerant and accept the refugee immigrants from outside of instead of the far right parties. So we think, and also, far left parties, they're not that Euroscepticism, so it's more efficient and for them to look on a general picture to make better decision in comparison to the outright parties, because take the example as Lee Kuan Yew in Singapore, he is making very aggressive changes in terms of social issue, and it's very far left ideology. And however, people are buying into those policies and make the more social cohesion in those societies. So we are the house who prove to you that why we have to have such a very aggressive far left agenda, and why they are very likely to be succeed, and why they can counter against the far right problem in Europe. That's why we win this debate.
I'd like the speaker to address and call upon the opposition whip to conclude this final round of debate.
Okay, we believe that the side of the government has failed here to show to us why the extreme left is actually going to have more votes, and second of all, why this is going to be a significant number of votes, because if they want to implement all of these policies, and you need coalitions in these countries to implement them, you need to have over 50% of the members of the parliament, and you need to have the government which is going to run with them. We believe that they failed to show us this, so we believe that the impact that they claim do not stand. We believe that on the side of closing oppositions, we bring you 5 things. First of all, we bring you the characterization of the status quo. We believe that in developed countries where you already have, you have a social care, you have healthcare, you have a good welfare state, and you have higher standards for those people, we believe that this is something which is good. We believe that in those cases you have a problem with the migrant crisis, and this is why you have the rise of the right wing. We believe that the left, on this issue, if they want to nationalize things and have extremely high taxes on the wealthy, we believe that they lose political capital to actually help the immigrants and then implement other policies which are in their interest. And we believe that like in the countries where you have lower standards, you have certain issues. My partner shows you how you have different how you have actually structural problems in those countries, and then on top of that you have the problem with the migrant countries. We show you why the middle voters won't vote as they propose. The third thing we tell you, like, if they get in power, why this won't stand, because they will fail what they have promised. They won't be able to do it. You lose your trust in the left and you don't vote for them again. And we believe that like the thing is that like impact of the things if what they are trying to propose happens, that just it doesn't stand. So in terms of like the status quo, we told you that like if they wanted to propose that like perhaps if you wanted to advocate for all these extreme things, if this would give you like more political capital and more negotiation power, we already saw that this doesn't happen, and the cities that tried it, when we see that absolutely nothing changed. We believe that my partner showed you how there is like IMF, there are other countries and great companies and their lobby groups which don't have it in their interest to have strong nationalization and strong left-wing policies in these countries. We showed you like that, the example of Podemos in Spain. They were like, because ideology wants to sell themselves as something which is the truth, and it isn't an ideology. We believe that we have stronger scrutiny when you're claiming extreme things. This is why they got accused of corruptions, and this is why people lose their trust in there easily, because they're claiming this basically highly ideologically colored things. We believe that like in situations, they tell us that these people, the left, it doesn't say anything like this extreme, this is why they don't have support and they'll use populism. This isn't true. Like you have in certain countries fractions, you have communist parties, you have like in Serbia Marx 21, and we believe that this is like a smaller circle of people that doesn't get any support, especially because they tend to claim these extreme things and they tend to alienate the moderate voters. We believe that that is something which is problematic. We believe that in a situation where you have to choose between the extreme left and you have the choice between like moderate right, and then you still have the group of people which will vote for the extreme right, you have more right-wing people in the parliament. This means that you have less checks and balances on them, and this means that you will have you will have more scrutiny on people who are coming into their country. You will have less political capital and less power to deal with the migrant crisis, and you're more likely to have things like social care, health care, and help for educating these people, and all of these things. You'll have more chance of having those things repealed, and we believe that that is something which is problematic. And my partner already states to you all of the countries which already have the right wing in power and are predicted to win. And we believe that for these reasons we need to have more left wing people in the parliament. We believe that. So the political capital, we believe that this means that you can actually give more asylum seekers citizenships. We believe that this is something where you should choose your battles. Maybe you want to deal with unemployment. We believe that you need to have investors which will be able to provide more jobs than your government will. And we believe that in comparative, even the companies which you have right now over there, we believe they're less likely to want to invest, because why would you do that if your company can just be taken away? But why we believe that the moderate people are going to vote more for the right wing, and why we believe that when they tell us that you have the equality of attractiveness of both of these extreme parties. We believe that we believe you have the migrant crisis, and this is why people are fearing for some of their basic things. These people who are migrants, remind them that they can lose their jobs also. When you use this type of rhetoric, when you have high unemployment, this is something which you fear, right? This is you fear that your job is going to be taken away also by someone else. These are really basic things which tend to go to these people's emotion. We believe that people tend to generally dislike the extreme, but we believe that the right wing is offering them rhetoric that they will be protected. But the problem is that in these countries, you'll have connotations in ex-communist countries. You have connotations such as which is connected to dictatorship, which is connected to corruption, which is connected to things like kidnapping and weaker media freedom and freedom of speech. And in a lot of these countries, you already don't have that freedom of the media. And we believe that this is something why this won't be appealing to those people. You have that people have a status quo bias basically, and they don't show to us why they would all of a sudden want to vote for these people who are proposing these extreme changes. We believe that, especially in a situation, you will have the middle class who is going to accuse the lower classes even more that they don't work while they're the only ones who are staying productive in their society. So we believe that that is something which also doesn't stand. No, thank you. So we believe that they want to tell us that they're going to use the rhetoric of the anti-establishment. But we believe that because you have the right wing in most of these countries in power already, they can already like use that, and this isn't something which is necessarily comparative. Because the people have like, but if you use the extreme narratives, then you won't be able to deal with the humanitarian crisis. And in terms of like as my partner explains to you, like he gives you the exact mechanisms through which the richer people can actually like use this, and people who are of middle class and who actually own the companies and can control the media and have more money and can buy more space can actually fight these people. And it is going to be easy for them to dismantle it and say that, you know, if you have strong nationalization, and a lot of people like in ex-communist countries remember this, you have a large government apparatus, you have a lot of bureaucracy, these things work slow, you don't have enough competition, you have more likely to have worse services and the abuse of power. And we believe that like you will then tend to have like forced buying off of industries at a cheaper price. We will have people which will perceive that a property which they have earned might be taken away. We believe that these are the narratives which are going to be more dominant, and this is why you shouldn't incentivize these people to actually fight the left, because if the only thing where you have is the extreme left countering the right-wing parties, we believe that you're less likely to actually have them in the parliament, less likely to have them implement those things, and less likely to have checks and balances. For all these reasons, we beg you to vote for the closing opposition.
I'd like to speak for their remarks and ask the audience to recognize the performances of all speakers in this debate. Thank you all for coming out today.
Before you leave the room, let me tell you what is about to happen next. When you leave, there will be lunch, and at 4:30, we will commence with the ESL final in this room. A few important things. I need the ESL finalists to meet me here at the stage immediately after this round, so right now. If you're at the bottom of the auditorium, exit through the bottom exits. If you're at the front, exit through the back entrances. Masters will be done during dinner, and I need all the speakers in